adjust it over just a little bit so it'll come on. I'll fix it in a second. I'll fix it in a second. Maybe a quarter inch movement to get it all on the wall. Okay. So something a little different to hand out today. I know it's a little fuzzy. I took it from one of these screens that we'll be looking at later, but it's got some similar information. Last week we got to. I'm just going to go through. Let's see. It's, okay, we went through the four kings, and we were to Ahab. Of course, Ahab's the one married to Jezebel, and uh, rather infamous. But we talked end of last week how that uh, we would start including something else, and that gets to some prophets, some rather influential prophets. We're going to talk about Elijah. Now, this is a nice little sheet. I'll look for the original of this again, but uh, what's nice about this sheet is um, it shows prophets, but also shows where they were mainly a prophet at. So, in other words, were they a prophet in the southern kingdom of Judah, or were they a prophet in the northern kingdom? So, I'm going to go ahead and let me get that pulled up. And so, we're dealing with Elijah the prophet, is what we're going to start dealing with. It's probably going to take us a couple weeks on this. But Elijah, and most people know of Elijah, so they know Elijah, and the king that primarily he dealt with was Ahab, and of course his wife Jezebel, and uh, some good things. So this is the sheet that we have in person here, and now you see it on the screen, and you see all the different kings that we've talked about so far, and who was a prophet during that time. Now we're going to take some segues here and there. And so you see Elijah, you see some of these other lesser prophets that we dealt with, Jehu, Micaiah, Hananiah, and all these other different prophets. But if you notice, we get down in Judah's history about this same time period as Elisha, and there's a guy named Obadiah. Now, Obadiah has a book in the Old Testament, uh, one chapter. And so when we go back to the northern kingdom, we will, or excuse me, the southern kingdom, Judah, we will hit Obadiah when we get down to Jehoshaphat. What's important to do that, or I think it's a good idea, is you'll get to see the prophet if they wrote a book, minor prophet, major. You'll get to see the context in which they wrote. And so Obadiah, you kind of need to see that. Then you see another one of the early prophets in Joel. We know a little bit about Joel. What do we know from Joel? What do we remember that Joel wrote? What was? Yeah, he wrote the book of Joel, but what's in the book of Joel that we know from the New Testament? the day of Pentecost in Acts 2, who did Peter quote to explain how they could do these speaking tongues and other things? He quoted from the book of Joel. Joel was prophesying about, in fact, Joel says in the latter days, so people misconstrue what the latter days are. The latter days are simply the Christian age or the Christian era, the church era. And so Joel prophesied about that. So we'll get Joel. Joel's a fairly early of the minor prophets. Now, what you'll see is the minor prophets, they really span they go from Obadiah, who is actually fairly early in the kingdom of Judah, and we see fairly early in these kings that we're studying. And then you get all the way down to Malachi, which was likely the last source of inspiration written in the Old Testament before you have about 400 years of quiet. And so we see this, and then you get in the northern kingdom, you get prophets like Amos. Once again, you get Hosea, which we'll get to that, and you also get to one named Jonah. We know a lot about Jonah, but Jonah was also fairly early on, and Jonah was under a king of Israel. Now, so Jonah, his prophecy and his works was mainly directed to Gentiles, and that's a good, interesting thing. But we will get to that when it comes to it, um, and, um, and so we'll see how this goes. But for our lesson today, we're mainly going to be dealing with Elijah. So we're going to be in 1 Kings 17 is where our lesson's going to spend today. Now, something else we need to do. So certain people are more influential or have a bigger presence, than others, i.e., it's more noteworthy of what they did. And Elijah is one of those influential figures. And as a result, he's going to have some special information about him. Let's see if I can find him. Okay. So get your Thompson Chain Bible out for a second because there's going to be a screen in just a second that's going to deal with it. So you get back to like 4306C in those range. It's page 1880. Well, your Bible's different, but the 4306 starts with Abraham. It shows a map. So I'll let you get there before I start describing it. C. Yeah, and that's not going to be what I'm looking for, but it's in here somewhere. B. What'd you say? 1880. Yours. Yeah, there it is. Okay. Uh, mm, the journey of Abraham. Yeah. But you see how those things do. They show a map and then they go through the different things they did. It goes into Moses, Joshua, uh, Gideon, Samuel, Saul, um, David, Solomon, And I thought it did Elisha, but apparently it doesn't. Um, okay, but somewhere I got a chart. We'll see. Let's see. So let me see if there's another place for this, or this just came from a separate, may just came from a separate source. But you can see it does the same thing. It's got the different things they did in their life. Let's see if I can- This may just be an independent source that was made to look like the way Thompson Chain did it. They have Elijah 23. No, it don't have it in the map form. Okay, so it don't have it. It just has it in list form. So, but it's similar. You can see on the screen. It's a similar thing where it's got just like those at the end you saw. So someone just generated one like that. So what we're going to go through is we're going to be going through these things that highlight. So I'll print this out for y'all next week. I thought it was from that because it's the same style. So anyway, I'll print this out for you next week. So anyway, the great prophet Elijah. So he was apparently from the village of Tishbe, uh, south of the Sea of Galilee, since it's known as Elijah the Tishbite in 71. But you notice where Tishbe is. It is on uh, the brook Cherith that comes off there south of the Sea of Galilee. But it's on, if you notice, it's on the eastern side of the Jordan River. So most of the time when we see influential people and other things, they come from the western side of the Jordan River. But anyway, Elisha was from uh, this over here. Um, and so anyway, we'll see what it says about him. Two, he predicted drought as God's punishment, prophesied against kings Ahab and Ahaziah of Israel at capital city of Samaria in the 9th century. So in 1 Kings 17, like I said, that's where we're going to be today. uh, Verse 1. Now, this is the first time you hear about him, but I mean, he obviously had been around a while, but this is something influential that was spoken. As I've said many times, the Bible's not written like a novel. It's not written like the way we would write it. Someone as influential as Elijah, because he's even prominent in the New Testament. He was one of the three of the on the Mount of Transfiguration with Moses and Jesus. Uh, you know, you'd want like a backstory. I'd talk about what was Elijah like when he was born. What did he do? How he became a prophet when he first was called to be a prophet, and he obviously had done other things. And so you if regular humans were writing it, they would do that because they'd want to elevate someone as prominent as Elijah. But it just comes into focus when it's pertinent to especially the kings. It says, "Now Elijah the Tishbite of Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab," that's the king, "As the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain in these years except by my word." And the word of the Lord came to him, "Depart from here and turn eastward and hide yourself by the brook Cherith." So that's makes sense. He would hide. This is pretty close to where he grew up, was from, and so he would know. You think about it. These people that evade law enforcement for a long time. The guy that was I believe it was the bomber there in Atlanta. He hid for, I think it was years. He went up in the mountains there of Georgia and North Carolina, and he knew him. And I mean, it'd be like, you know, if someone was looking for you, you went kind of off in the back areas. You would know where to. Most people would know. But anyway, so Elijah went to his home area, and which is east of the Jordan. "You shall drink from the brook, as I commanded the ravens to feed you there." Now that's pretty significant there. So he went and did according to the word of the Lord. He went by and lived by the brook Cherith, that is east of the Jordan. And the ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. Now that's pretty. That you talk about, today. You got DoorDash, and they've talked about having drones come and send packages to you and stuff. Well, Elijah's got to stay by the creek and take it easy, and he could drink the water from the creek, and then uh, the ravens came, gave him food in the morning and evening. Um, and after a while, the brook dried up because there was no rain in the land. So it was all good up until that point. So anyway, he prophesied, he predicted, or he said there'd be no rain. God had told him. Now, also during this time, of course, he's got the miraculous feeding, but he also did some miracles. Elijah and the widow. So, in 1 Kings 17, 8 through 6, the word of the Lord came to him. "Arise and go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and dwell there. Behold, I've commanded a widow there to feed you." So he's upgraded from ravens to a widow. So he arose and went to Zarephath. And when he came to the gate of the city, behold, a widow was there gathering sticks. Now, uh, to show you where that is, Zarephath, it's up in the Tyre and Sidon area, Sidon up north. So it is, you can see the Mediterranean Sea. And it's up top of this map, and it is. Oh, I'm afraid I'll say the wrong country, so I'm not going to say, but it is north of Israel even to this day. It's a it's pretty good ways from the rest of Jerusalem in any of Israel, and so once again now he is out of the limits where the king would have been over. So he's out there. By the way, why would he not want to be around the king? What do you think the king thought of Elijah? It was his fault. It wasn't raining. I mean, the way the king would have looked at it. Couldn't be his own fault. It'd be because this prophet said it's not going to rain. And when he came to the gate of the city, behold, a widow was there gathering sticks, and he called to her and said, "Bring me a little water in a vessel that I may drink." And as she was going to bring it, he called to her and said, "Bring me a morsel of bread in your hand." And she said, "As the Lord our God, your God lives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. And I am gathering a couple of sticks that I may go and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." Now, why is she talking so pessimistic? Can't she just go to Walmart, get her some more supplies? Drought, there was nothing. Yeah. So she was literally going to give him the last of anything, and they were going to eat it, and then her and her son would just die. And Elijah said to her, "Do not fear. Go and do as you have said. But first make me a little cake of it and bring it to me, and afterward make something for yourself and your son. For thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, the jar of flour shall not be spent, the jug of oil shall not be empty until the day that the Lord send rains upon the earth." And she went and did as Elijah said, and she and her household ate for many days. The jar of flour was not spent, neither did the jug of oil become empty, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke by Elijah. Now, that would save you some grocery bills if, just the supplies you had never ended. So, after Elijah was there and blessed it and everything, the flour never emptied. The oil was always there. And so she was always able to make some bread. Now, can you imagine that's what you had to live on, though?
Didn't you say that he received it from birds or something?
Well, that was when he was at the brook in Cherith. But when the brook dried up, the Lord sent him up here and said, a widow will take care of you. And so,
Still the Lord provided.
still the Lord provided him, yes. And the Lord's providing the widow because she's taking care of the prophet. And so the Lord is taking care of both of them. After this, the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, became ill. And his illness was so severe that there was no breath left in him. And she said to Elijah, what have you against me, O man of God? You have come to me to bring my sin to remembrance and to cause the death of my son. And he said to her, give me your son. And he took him from her arms and carried him up into the upper chamber where he lodged and laid him on his own bed. And he cried to the Lord, O Lord my God, you have brought calamity even upon the widow with whom I sojourned by killing her son. By the way, so this woman was not a Jew. She was not a Israelite. She was not a Hebrew. She lived way north of where they were. She was more similar in relation. You remember the Syro-Phoenician woman that we see about the New Testament that, wanted, said, compared herself to a dog that ate the crumbs and said, "That's all I want." But here we see this woman. Her son died, and Elijah feels compassion for her and prays to God. Then he stretched himself upon the child 3 times and cried to the Lord, "O Lord, my God, let this child's life come into him again." And the Lord listened to the voice of Elijah, and the life of the child came into him again. And he revived. And Elijah took the child and brought him down from the upper chamber into the house and delivered him to his mother. And Elijah said, see, your son lives. And the woman said to Elijah, now I know that you are a man of God, and the word of the Lord is in your mouth is truth. Now, I point this out that she wasn't an Israelite to point out that there were people who believed in the true God that weren't necessarily the children of Jacob. And it's important to know that there was always some that did not. We see in the New Testament that there were what they were called proselytes at the gate. Now, there was a different term. If you were a true proselyte, you would actually be circumcised and you would go through this ritualistic process where you would become a de facto Jew. And at some point, your descendants would be full fledged Jewish people. But most people in the New Testament, like Cornelius and people like that we read about, they were not true proselytes in the sense they had become Jews, but they believed in the true God and they worshiped in the synagogues. They couldn't go in the temples, but yet they did the things that Jewish people did as far as in honoring the true God. And this woman appears to honor the true God. And so she recognized that Elijah truly was a prophet. Uh, and that is all of that one. I think we can get a little bit in the next lesson. Pull it up. It had came out for some reason. Let's see. Elijah the Prophet, Part 2. Okay. So same screen that we saw, and I'll print that for you next week. I'll print this one out for you. Uh, so anyway, well, which one are we to? We're gonna get close to the yeah. So well, that was a refresh actually. Okay, victorious over the prophets of Baal. So the drought's got to come to an end sometime. And you can see Mount Carmel. It's a fairly important. It's probably on maps, but it's just above the plain of Jezreel. Uh, let's see if we can find a good map that we can. Okay, so if you look on map number 8. No, that's not map number 6. And if you look on map number 6, close to the Mediterranean Sea, at the very north of the Israel part, uh, just below Phoenicia, you'll see Mount Carmel. And just to the south of Mount Carmel, you'll see Megiddo, which there was very influential battles there. Of course, in it's somewhat Greek styled in the New Testament, especially in the book of Revelation. It's called Armageddon. So that is the place that all that is based. Uh, and so we see here Mount Carmel, and this is where there is going to be a battle between Elijah and the prophets of Baal. So we're now in 1 Kings 18. And so it says, in many days the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the third year, saying, third year of the drought, by the way, is what that references. Can you imagine having a drought with no? Now, to call it a drought is probably not the correct way to call it. So we have a drought. In fact, when I first moved here in 2015, y'all were in a drought still. Although I think somewhere during that year, I think you officially came out of the drought, because the way they determine a drought has to do with average rainfall over a period of time. And so uh, it takes a while to know for sure you've came out of the drought, or you even enter into a drought. If we have a dry spell come, uh, you know, we'll say, well, that's kind of like a drought, but it officially isn't a drought unless your rainfall for the year is substantially lower than it average amount is. And then it takes a while to come up. That's the way we officially declare droughts in the U.S. And that's probably correct, because you can't just base a dry month it's called that a drought. That's just not the way it works, because you got water tables, you got river levels and stuff. Well, can you imagine though not raining, not even dew, for 3 full years? What would things look like around here? Everything would be dead. What about the lakes? What kind of level would they be? Even the Arkansas River would be much lower than what it is. You would see a point. I remember we've had some significant droughts where the Mississippi River gets down low enough that the barges can't travel down it. They just have to run ashore, and they're just there until it finally rains. Uh, there's still river, but it's just really low. And so, you get to a point where trees would go dormant, no grass would be growing, it would look like a desert. Uh, I remember we took our great trip out west, road trip. Everybody needs to do that once with their kids, especially. and and we did that, and we stopped in, I think it was Barstow, California. They call that the high desert. And very friendly church. We stopped at a church there, very friendly. And one of the elders came, started talking to me. He said, "Where y'all from?" And I said, "Well, I was from the Texarkana, Texas area." And he goes, "Oh," he said, "Y'all probably get more rain in one storm than we get all year." I said, "Well, how much y'all get?" He said, "We get a little less than 4 inches a year." I said, "Well, there's been many a rainstorm. We've had more than that, yeah." And so, could you imagine just getting 4 inches of rain a year? Uh, but that's desert conditions. They didn't even get that. And so, like I say, just think about how dry that must have been. And how many people probably died from that? How many people were malnourished because of that? You know, animals. Think about the animals. I mean, the animals would have been hard pressed. And it says, so after many days in the third year, saying, "Go show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth." So Elijah went to show himself to Ahab. Now the famine was severe in Samaria. Now we've talked about this. So where is Samaria?
Just south
Well, it's a city, but in this case, it's not talking about the city of Samaria. What is it talking about?
country.
The country. So the country is the same as Israel. The country is the same as the Northern Kingdom. So in all of Israel, the in the Northern Kingdom, the drought, the famine was severe, uh, and so we saw that it first was used. I think Ahab's father was the first one that moved the capital there, and Ahab made it a prominent place, and so Ahab called Obadiah, who was over the household. Now Obadiah feared the Lord greatly, and when Jezebel cut, by the way, this is not the prophet Obadiah. This is another Obadiah, apparently a common name back then. And when Jezebel cut off the prophets of the Lord, now what does it mean that Jezebel cut off the prophets of the Lord? What does that phrase mean? She stopped paying them money? In prophecy, Isaiah and Daniel both talk about Jesus, that he'd be cut off from the land of the living. What does that cut off phrase mean? Well, yeah, they're not allowed, but that wasn't the that wasn't the greatest concern of theirs. Goes beyond not being allowed. Cut off is a euphemism for killing them. Killing them. She killed them. Yeah, she killed the prophets of the Lord, the ones that she knew about, come across. She had them executed, killed. Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by fifties in a cave, and fed them with bread and water. I, you know, I used to joke about that's what prisons would do, give you bread and water. I can't imagine that's all you could eat on was all you had is bread and water. It just you would be very weak, I would think, from that type of diet because bread don't really have hardly any protein, and so it would be enough to live off of, but that's about it. Um, And Ahab said to Obadiah, "Go through the land to all the springs of water and to all the valleys. Perhaps we will find grass and save the horses and mules alive and not lose some of the animals." Once again, when you have a drought that's that significant, uh, you know, not only people are you concerned with, animals, livestock. So they divided the land between them to pass through it. Ahab went in one direction by himself, and Obadiah went in another direction by himself. Now, this points out that Obadiah was a believer in God and that he tried to help as many of these prophets as he could, but he was still in service of the king. So he had his job to do a livelihood. And as Obadiah was on his way, behold, Elijah met him. Uh, and Obadiah recognized him and fell on his face and said, "Is it you, my Lord Elijah?" Now, Elijah had been up in a different country, up in what New Testament was Phoenicia. I'm not sure exactly what country it would have been at this point, but he was in a different land, different country. He had been AWOL for a while, just hiding himself. And he answered, "Is it I? Go tell your Lord. Uh, Behold, Elijah is here." And he said, "How have I sinned that you would give your servant into the hand of Ahab to kill me?" So why would that be taken against Obadiah that he announced that Elijah? Well, I'm sure Ahab wanted to kill Elijah. But Elijah said, "As the Lord your God lives, there is no nation or kingdom where my Lord has not sent to seek you." And when they would say, "He is not here," he would take an oath of the kingdom or nation that they had not found you. And now you say, "Go tell your Lord, behold, Elijah is here." So they've been looking for Elijah. They've been wanting to kill him. They, like, once again, they blame him for the calamity. "And as soon as I have gone from you, the Spirit of the Lord will carry you, I know not where. And so when I come and tell Ahab, and he cannot find you, he will kill me." So in Obadiah's mind, what's going to happen is he's going to go back to Ahab. Ahab's going to know where he's at so he can kill him. And when God has told Elijah to leave, well, they're going to kill Obadiah. Actually seems pretty logical if you think about it. "Although your servant have feared the Lord from youth. Has it not been told, my Lord, what I did when Jezebel killed the prophets of the Lord? How I it didn't say cut off, said kill. That's what it means, by the way, if you thought I was just making that up. How I hid 100 men of the Lord's prophets by fifties in a cave and fed them bread and water. And now you say, Go tell your Lord, behold, Elijah is here, and he will kill me." And Elijah said, "As the Lord of hosts lives, before whom I stand, I will surely show myself to him today." So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When Ahab saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, "Is it you, you troubler of Israel?" It's your fault that we're all messed up now. And he answered, "I have not troubled Israel, but you have, and your father's house, because you have abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals. Now therefore send and gather all Israel to me at Mount Carmel, and the 450 prophets of Baal, and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who eat at Jezebel's table." Now, that was Jezebel's background. But anyway, so I've got here a listing an Asherah. What is it? What is an Asherah? Uh, like so much in Canaanite religion. So, the name and worship of Asherah were borrowed from Assyria. She was the wife of the war god Asir, whose name was identified with that of the city of Asher, with the result that he became the national god of Assyria. Since Asurtu was merely the feminine form of Asur, the superintendent or leader, it is probable that it was originally an epithet of Ishtar, Ashtoreth of Nineveh. In the West, however, Asherah and Ashtoreth came to be distinguished from one another, Asherah being exclusively the goddess of fertility, whereas Ashtoreth passed into a moon goddess. Now, and once again, I've told this that you'd worship Asherah under really big trees, and that's where you would come to worship this fertility god. Now, Baal. And so a lot of times you'll read about the Baals and the Asherah. That was the two principal gods that people worship in the land of Canaan and over time Israel. Temples of Baal at Samaria and Jerusalem are mentioned in 1 Kings 1:18, where they had been erected at the time when Ahab, the Ahab dynasty, this King Ahab we're talking about, endeavored to fuse Israelites and Jews and Phoenicians. Now, that had to be where Jezebel was from. Into a single people under the same national Phoenician god. Altars on which incense was burned to Baal were set up in the streets of Jerusalem, according to Jeremiah, apparently on the flat roofs of the houses. And the temple of Baal contained an image of God in the shape of a pillar or Bethel. In the reign of Ahab, Baal was served in Israel by 450 priests. We just read that, as well as by prophets. And his worshippers were special vestments when his ritual performed, 2 Kings 10:22. The ordinary offering made to the god consisted of incense and burnt sacrifices. On extraordinary occasions, the victim was human. Jeremiah 19:5. At times, the priests worked themselves into a state of ecstasy and dancing around the altar, slash themselves with knives. We're going to see that, like certain dervish orders in modern Islam. So Ahab sent to all the people of Israel and gathered the prophets together at Carmel. Elijah came near to all the people and said, "Now, by the way, I want you to think about this. Why did Ahab agree to this to begin with?" Well, Ahab wasn't a believer in God. Ahab sees he's got these 450 prophets to one Elijah, he's not really worried about what's going to transpire. And I'm sure in his mind, he's going to kill Elijah when this is all done. Um, but Elijah says, how long will you go limping between two different opinions? We'll have a debate. If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. And the people did not answer him a word. Then Elijah said to the people, even I only, am left a prophet of the Lord. Wasn't technically true, but in the sense of being public at this moment, yes. But Baal's prophets are 450 men. Let 2 bulls be given to us, and let them choose one bull for themselves and cut it in pieces and lay it on the wood. But put no fire to it. And I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood and put no fire to it. And you call upon the name of your God, and I will call upon the name of the Lord. And the God who answers by fire, he is God. And the people said, it is well spoken. Sounds like a great plan. It would show who's the real God, because if your God can burn this altar, then that's a true God. However it can't, then then you've got to serve the wood. Now, the mistaken logic, of course, God had a hand in all this, but what is Elijah thinking? Because he knows that that's a false God, that they're not going to be able to do anything. He knows that the true God is going to consume this with fire. What do you think Elijah's thinking after this takes place? What do you think his thoughts are? Because the way he framed it is serve the one that's the true God. So what should that lead to when it becomes clear that there's only one true God? What would you expect?
People to
Turn to God. And that's the misgivings, I think. So, people have said, well, if people would have seen a miracle like in the days of, say, Elijah, if people would have seen Moses and the miracles that were formed then, if people would have seen uh, Lazarus raised from the dead by Jesus, they'd be believers today. But in each of those things, and all those things, did that really change most people's hearts? No.
Got some that well, that's not the God we should be worshiping. Let's pick another God.
Well, or just
Idol,
they just it is a difference in acknowledging that there is a God. It's a difference in saying, well, that's the true God. Even our lesson about Nebuchadnezzar, he saw these miracles and that God did, and he's like, man, that's impressive, but he still didn't believe to the point where he was going to worship the true God. Uh, he had to be humbled himself, and so I think it's imperative for us to understand that we can show somebody. They might even say, "Well, I agree with you. Yeah, there's Jesus was real. He was apparently a son of God," and they can go on, but that doesn't mean they're going to then be a true follower and do what Jesus would want them to do. So, uh, it seems like a disconnect, but that's just the way people are. God gives you freedom to either worship Him or not worship
we have people doing that today.
Him. Yeah,
You got people that had been divorced and remarried, and when you let them know what they've got to do,
they're not going to do it.
they don't want to go there.
They're not to that point, and they may say, "Yeah, I believe in God, I believe in Jesus," but God would be okay with, God would want me happy. Well, there's nowhere in Scripture they're going to find any sentiment that God just wants us happy. Uh, God wants us faithful. God wants us to be with Him one day. But anyway, so then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose for yourselves one bull and prepare it first." He's going to let them go first. For you are many, and call upon the name of your God, but put no fire in it. They took the bull that was given them, and they prepared it, and they called upon the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, "Oh, Baal, answer us." But there was no voice, and no one answered. And they limped around the altar they'd made, and at noon Elijah mocked them. He couldn't help himself. Cry loud, for he is a god. Either he's musing or relieving himself. Maybe he's, uh, you know, taking a nap, or maybe he's, had to go to the bathroom, whatever. And so, you know, he's on a journey, or perhaps he's asleep, must be waking. So, he yelled a little louder, and they cried aloud and cut themselves after their custom with swords and lances until blood gushed out upon them. And as midday passed, they raved on until the time of the offering of oblation. But there was no voice, no one answered, no one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come nearer to me." And all the people came near to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. Elijah took 12 stones. What would the 12 stones represent? 12 tribes, 12 sons of Jacob. According to the number of tribes, the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord came, saying, "Israel shall be your name." And with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord. And he made a trench about the altar. Now, why would he put a trench? Well, as great as would contain 2 seahs of seed. And he put the wood in order and cut the bull in pieces and laid it on the wood. And he said, "Fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood." Now, I've never really thought about this much, but they were probably thinking he's really crazy at this point. First of all, how much do you think 4 jars of water was worth in that day? Bear in mind, it hadn't rained in 3 years. That was probably worth more than gold at that time. And he said, "Do it a second time." They did it a second time. He said, "Do it a third time." They did it a third time. And the water ran around the altar and filled the trench also with water. And the time of the offering of the oblation, Elijah the prophet came near and said, "O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, that I have done all these things at your word. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back." Then the fire of the Lord fell. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. That's a hot fire that just takes up that much water. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, "The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God." Elijah said to them, "Seize the prophets of Baal. Let not one of them escape." And they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slaughtered them there. So they killed all the prophets of Baal. We're going to stop there because Dale's got to go ahead and get on. But we'll conclude with this. And once again, Elijah had to think in his mind, man, we're going to have a revolution. Everyone's going to be a believer in God after this. The king was there to witness it. He's going to change his views. And, a lot of times we think, well, surely people will turn to God, in times of calamity. Surely people will turn to God. And yet it doesn't happen. A lot of people will say, "God, if you'll just do this, I'll be a true believer. I'll do everything." And then things work out and they forget, they turn to the way they were. So appreciate you being here. I'm going to go ahead and stop the stream, and we'll be